The rain came down in slow sheets as Cameron Price turned off the main highway and onto the narrow gravel path that led deep into the woods. He could barely see the road ahead through the fogged-up windshield, but the GPS had already died 20 minutes ago and there was no cell service. He relied now on memory, half-recalled stories from his mother about the winding paths through Marrow Creek, a place she had sworn never to return to. And yet here he was. The letter had come 3 weeks earlier, an inheritance from a grandmother he never met. A lawyer in Charleston had tracked him down and explained in cold legalese that he now owned a property in rural West Virginia, a house that had stood empty since the late 1970s. His mother had called it cursed. As a child, he thought she was exaggerating. Now, with his life unraveling, a failed journalism career, a collapsed marriage, and mounting debt, it didn't seem so crazy to consider curses real. The road narrowed as the forest closed in. Ancient trees leaned toward his car like spectators watching a funeral procession. The clouds above were low and bruised, pregnant with thunder that rolled occasionally in the distance. After another 15 minutes of crawling through the thickening fog, he saw it. The house. It stood like a memory someone tried to forget. A towering Victorian, flanked by gnarled oaks, its wood rotted in places, the windows darkened by grime. The wraparound porch sagged in the middle like it had been holding its breath for decades. Moss climbed the walls. The front gate hung open at an awkward angle, twisted by time or something else. Cameron pulled up, killed the engine, and stepped out into the wet silence. The air smelled of mildew and damp earth. His boots crunched on gravel, then softened on the mossy path leading to the porch. The key turned easily in the lock. The door opened with a groan. The air inside was heavy, thick with dust and something deeper, something sour and meaty. Like wet wood and old breath. He gagged as he stepped inside. The foyer stretched up 2 stories, lit only by the pale gray of a single broken window high above. A chandelier hung crookedly from the ceiling, its crystals dull with dust. Furniture sat where it had been abandoned, a fainting couch, a side table with a warped mirror, a grandfather clock that had long since stopped ticking. His footsteps echoed as he wandered room to room. Wallpaper peeled like old skin. Cobwebs clung to every corner. In the dining room, a long oak table was still set with silverware and cracked porcelain plates, as if a meal had once been prepared but never served. He found the library last. The door creaked open to reveal floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, all packed with yellowing tomes. A leather chair faced a cold fireplace. On the mantel sat a photograph of a woman in her 50s, tight curls, sharp cheekbones, and eyes that seemed to follow him. The back read, Margaret Holloway Price, 1977. His grandmother. He put the photo down and turned. A shiver ran through him. For just a second, he thought he saw her standing in the reflection of the fireplace glass. But when he looked again, there was only his own warped reflection. He tried the upstairs next. The master bedroom was preserved in eerie stillness. The bed was made. On the nightstand, a Bible, a ceramic angel, and a jewelry box that wouldn't open. The guest rooms were dustier. One still had toys scattered on the floor, wooden blocks, a stuffed bear missing an eye. He stepped over them and opened the closet. There were claw marks on the inside of the door. Not scratches, gouges. He took a shaky breath and backed out. He decided to sleep downstairs on the couch, telling himself it was only because of the dust. He couldn't admit the upstairs felt wrong, like something lived in the shadows there. That night, he dreamed of roots. They grew from his feet and hands, burrowed into the wooden floor, pulsing with blood. Something massive stirred beneath the house, something breathing. He could feel it beneath the floorboards, warm and wet and ancient. He awoke to the sound of footsteps above him. But he was alone. Cameron stood frozen in the dark living room. The sound of the footsteps upstairs had stopped, but the weight of their presence lingered, like the scent of a stranger's cologne after they've left the room. The air felt thicker now, staler, heavier. He waited in silence. No creaks. No sounds. He exhaled and rubbed his face. Old house, he muttered. Wood settles. That's all. But even as he said it, the words felt hollow. This wasn't settling. The steps had been steady. Measured. Deliberate. He flipped on the lantern he'd brought from the car, an old camping model with a flickering LED core, and crept toward the staircase. Each step he climbed creaked with slow protest. The second floor was colder than before. The hallway stretched ahead, shadows pooling in doorways. He moved toward the master bedroom. Empty. The closet, still open. He checked the guest rooms. Nothing. But the final room, at the far end of the hall, had a door he hadn't noticed before. It was smaller than the others, and painted over in a dull gray that blended into the wall. He reached for the knob. It turned, but the door didn't open. Stuck. Or locked. Cameron crouched and examined the keyhole. It was old, an iron skeleton lock, likely original to the house. He'd seen keys like it in movies, but none had come with the house paperwork. Frustrated, he leaned his forehead against the wood. It was warm. He jerked back. Then something knocked from the other side. 3 sharp raps. Quick. Precise. He stumbled back, heart pounding, and the lantern flickered violently in his hand. For a moment, he saw a shadow leak from the base of the door like smoke, thin and unnatural. He bolted downstairs. Back in the living room, he turned on every flashlight he had. The house resisted light. The beams didn't pierce the dark so much as float in it, like headlights in fog. He tried to sleep, but the walls had begun to whisper. At first, it was indistinct murmuring, like distant voices bleeding through a radio. Then clearer words surfaced. Names. His name. Cameron. The voice was old. Feminine. But warped, like it had been underwater for too long. Cameron, come upstairs. He wrapped himself in a blanket and tried to drown it out, but even through the fabric, the voice pushed through. The next morning, he discovered something even stranger. The photo of his grandmother on the fireplace mantel had changed. Her eyes were now open. Not just open, looking straight at him. In the original picture, she had been glancing to the side. Now, her pupils stared directly forward, mouth parted slightly, as if mid-breath. He dropped it. The glass shattered on the floor, but the photo was still intact, untouched by time. Cameron left the house. He needed answers. He needed people. He drove back into the town of Marrow Creek. It looked like a town from a postcard long forgotten in someone's attic. A diner with a crooked sign. A barbershop with no barber. A gas station that hadn't had gas in decades. The few people he saw all looked up when he passed, expressionless, still. Eyes that followed him. He entered the diner. A bell above the door jingled, startling the only man inside, a tall figure in his 60s with a permanent scowl. He stood behind the counter polishing a chipped mug. The overhead lights buzzed weakly. "You're the price boy," the man said. It wasn't a question. Cameron nodded, surprised. "Yeah. I just inherited the house on /n/n, I know the one. Margaret's place." "You knew her?" The man stared at him a moment longer before setting the mug down. Everyone knew her. Most kept their distance. Why? She kept something in that house. Something she tried to bury. Cameron leaned forward. What was it? The man hesitated. Then he motioned for Cameron to follow him to a booth at the back. The vinyl seat was cracked, the table sticky. He spoke in a low voice. "Your grandmother was a witch." Cameron almost laughed. "Like, seriously? Not the broomstick kind. The old kind. Blood rituals. Binding rites. Things she learned from the woods. That house, she didn't own it. Not really. It let her live there because she fed it." "Fed it, what?" "Memories. Pain. Sometimes animals. Sometimes worse." Cameron went pale. "She tried to seal it up in the 70s, the man continued. "When your mother left. Said it was growing too strong. Then she disappeared." Cameron swallowed hard. "She didn't die. No body ever found. Some say the house took her." Just then, the bell on the diner door jingled again. An old woman in a shawl entered, hunched and dragging a walker. Her eyes were clouded with cataracts, but she moved with an unsettling certainty. She stopped beside Cameron's booth and sniffed. "You've been inside it," she rasped. "I can smell it on you." He nodded cautiously. She leaned closer. "The house is watching. Don't let it speak your name. What happens if it does?" She smiled with yellow teeth. "Then it knows you. And if it knows you, it owns you." Before he could ask more, she shuffled to a corner booth and sat down in silence. He left town quickly after that. Back at the house, dusk had settled in. The fog returned with a vengeance, so thick it moved like liquid across the porch. As he stepped inside, the smell of rot hit him, stronger now. Something had changed. The wallpaper in the hallway had begun to peel in large, curling sheets, revealing something underneath, symbols carved into the wood, deep and erratic. Some looked like language. Others like eyes. One was bleeding. Actual blood. That night, the whispers returned. Louder. And this time, they weren't alone. Something walked the hall outside his door. Its footsteps were wrong, too heavy, too slow. And dragging something. When he finally dozed off near dawn, he dreamed of his grandmother. She stood at the end of his bed, face half missing, her eyes weeping shadows. "It's hungry," she whispered. "Don't feed it." Cameron didn't sleep after the dream. He lay in the cold living room, wrapped in a thin blanket, every light on, listening to the sounds of the house as it breathed. Because it was breathing, he could hear it now, unmistakably. Slow, wet, rhythmic. The sound seemed to come from the walls themselves, or maybe the floor, like lungs buried beneath the foundation. At dawn, the house fell into eerie silence. The whispers stopped. The creaking stopped. Even the wind outside seemed to vanish. That made it worse somehow. He decided to search the house again, every inch this time. Whatever this was, it wanted him afraid. He needed to be smarter than that. Fight back with logic. Light. Reason. He started in the attic. The entrance was through a narrow hatch at the top of the hallway, above the locked door he'd encountered the night before. He dragged a chair beneath it and pushed the hatch open. Dust rained down. The ladder groaned with age as he climbed into a space that hadn't seen human eyes in decades. The attic was vast, larger than it should have been. The floorboards were uneven, and strange stains marred the wood. Boxes sat in the corners, collapsed in on themselves. A trunk near the far wall caught his attention. Inside it were old journals. Dozens of them. Leather-bound, their covers cracked, some stained with dark fingerprints. His grandmother's handwriting curled across the yellowed pages. He sat, knees aching on the splintered floor, and began to read. May 2, 1956. The hollow grows restless. It speaks to me now, not in words, but shapes, feelings. Hunger. It wants more than the land. More than animals. It wants stories, pain, memory. It feeds through emotion. Through presence. Through blood. September 18, 1962. Tried to bind it. Old rights. Took the roots from the woods. Drew the runes in my own blood. Held for 6 days. Then it bled through again. In the walls. In the mirrors. I saw my father's face in the glass. He's been dead 20 years. June 4, 1974. My daughter hears the house now. I must send her away. If it speaks her name, it will claim her like it tried to claim me. I've carved the key into the bone. Hidden it behind the Watcher's face. Cameron stopped. Watcher's face? He flipped the journal over. A loose scrap of paper fell from between the pages. On it was a sketch of the fireplace, specifically the photo frame of his grandmother. He ran downstairs. The shattered glass still lay on the floor. He picked up the frame carefully. The back had a slight bulge. With a small knife, he pried the panel loose. Inside was a long, thin object wrapped in silk. A key. Old. Iron. Cold to the touch despite the summer heat. The locked door upstairs. He didn't wait. Within minutes, he stood before the door, key in hand, breathing shallow. He hesitated only a second before inserting the key. It turned with a slow, scraping sound. Click. The door swung open. It was a staircase. Leading down. He blinked. That made no sense. This was the second floor, there shouldn't be stairs down from here. But the black stairwell descended deep into darkness, the air drifting from it like the breath of a long-dead animal. He descended. Step by step, the light behind him vanished. The stairs twisted in impossible ways. The air grew colder, wetter, like the inside of a cave. His flashlight flickered, then steadied. He realized he couldn't hear anything anymore, no creaks, no wind, not even his own breathing. The stairs ended in a stone chamber. It looked like a root cellar, but the walls weren't made of brick. They were organic. Veined. Pulsing slightly. In the center stood a stone altar, blackened with ancient stains. Symbols circled the floor, carved deep into the rock. Some were the same ones from the journals. Others shifted when he looked too long, like they were alive. He approached the altar. A book lay open on it. The Hollow Watchers. The pages rippled as if breathing. He reached out, and a voice spoke behind him. Cameron. He turned. No one. But the name lingered in the air, reverberating like a struck bell. The voice wasn't human. It was layered. Female. Male. Child. All at once. It had said his name. His name. The warning echoed in his head, if it speaks your name, it owns you. The ground trembled. The walls pulsed faster. And from the far end of the room, a shape began to rise. It was not a creature, not in the traditional sense. It was a distortion, a warping of space, a knot of shadows and teeth and whispers. Faces bloomed in its mass, screaming silently. Some looked like his mother. Some like himself. He backed away, heart thundering. The thing shuddered forward, oozing across the stone, leaving a trail of rot and memory. He could feel it pressing against his mind, pushing into his thoughts. It didn't speak aloud anymore. It didn't need to. It was inside him. You will feed me, it said, without speaking. You will become part. Cameron screamed. He turned and fled up the stairs, stumbling, tripping, clawing his way back into the hall. The door slammed shut behind him. The key evaporated in his hand, crumbling into dust. He ran outside, gasping. The sky was black with birds circling overhead, even though it was mid-afternoon. The trees leaned in. The house seemed larger now, fatter, as if it had swollen with something. Something full. Something awake. Cameron didn't go back inside that night. He slept in the car, engine running, doors locked, the charm from his grandmother's trunk clutched in one hand. He watched the house through the windshield like it might move, and once, he swore it did. Just slightly. Like it shifted on its foundation, adjusting its weight. He left at dawn. He remembered what the man at the diner had said, Clara Caro. Margaret's assistant. Witch doctor. Hermit. Someone who knew the old ways. The townspeople were reluctant to give directions, but eventually an old gas station attendant scribbled a crude map on the back of a receipt. If you find her, he said, don't go asking for favors unless you're willing to pay. Cameron followed the cracked roads north, then hiked half a mile into the woods. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. No birds. No insects. Just the crunch of leaves underfoot and the smell of iron and moss. Clara's cabin looked more like a ritual site than a home. Twisted tree limbs formed a kind of arch above the porch. Bones, fox, rabbit, bird, hung from the eaves. Carvings ran across the entire structure like veins. As he approached, the wind died entirely. He knocked. The door creaked open before his knuckles landed. A woman stood there. Tall. Thin. Barefoot. Her skin was the color of cedar bark, her eyes a pale milk white. Her hair was gray and matted with ash. She studied him silently, then stepped aside to let him in. You're Margaret's blood, she said. I smelled you 2 days ago. Cameron hesitated. You knew my grandmother? I buried her, Clara said flatly. Or what was left of her. Inside, the cabin smelled of dried herbs, burnt wax, and something darker. The walls were covered in hanging charms, bones strung with twine, jars filled with black liquid, dried flowers. A fire crackled in the hearth, though there was no visible wood in it. She tried to contain the hollow, Clara said. But you opened it again. Your presence, your blood, was enough. Cameron sat stiffly in a worn chair. I didn't do anything. I just moved in. That's all it needed, she said. It's bound to your family. To your name. That house isn't haunted. It's alive. And now it remembers. He told her about the room below the second floor, the altar, the voices. The thing that spoke his name. Clara listened without expression. Then she went to a cabinet and began collecting items. You're not going to beat it. Not the way you are. But you might bind it again. At least long enough to get out with your soul intact. She handed him a pouch of black salt. A carved charm made of bone. A small flask filled with thick, dark red liquid. He stared at it. What is this? Your grandmother's blood. Collected before she passed. There's power in blood, especially hers. It still remembers. The hollow feeds on memory. Blood like this can confuse it. Confuse it? Long enough to trick it, Clara said. long enough to bind it again. But you have to finish what Margaret started. She laid out a ritual, salt across all thresholds. The charm around his neck. The blood poured onto the altar. And the incantation, a string of syllables that twisted the tongue and burned the throat. The true name of the hollow had to be spoken backward, inside a circle of protection. If it hears its name, Clara warned, it will come. It will show itself in its full form. You must not run. You must not speak your own name again. Cameron took the items, hands trembling. At the door, she gripped his shoulder. One more thing, she said. Don't look into the mirrors. They aren't mirrors anymore. He returned to the house as the sun dipped low. Fog had returned, denser than ever. The trees bent toward the house like supplicants. The windows glowed faintly, though he'd turned off every light. Inside, it was already humming. He sprinkled salt across every doorway, every windowsill. He placed the charm around his neck, tied tight with red string. In the basement, if it could be called that, he redrew the symbols around the altar in fresh chalk, added the blood, and took a long, shaking breath. He opened the hollow watchers to the final chapter. The words swam on the page. His eyes stung. His mouth went dry. Still, he began to chant. The house reacted instantly. The temperature dropped. The air thickened, then vibrated like a struck drum. The walls wept a dark fluid, memory, Clara had called it. Faces formed in the liquid, pressing outward, mouthing silent screams. He continued the chant. The light bulbs overhead burst. A chorus of whispers rose in the dark. And from the altar, the hollow began to rise. It was not smoke. It was not shadow. It was absence, of light, of reason, of time. And it knew him. Cameron, it cooed. Your grandmother burned so sweet. He screamed the final syllables of the chant. The thing paused. Then lunged. He hurled the rest of the vial onto the altar. The blood hissed on contact. Light burst from the runes, white and blinding. The hollow shrieked, not with sound, but thought. Memories tore through Cameron's mind, his childhood dog dying, his mother crying in the hospital, his first heartbreak, his failures, his guilt. It wanted to eat all of it. He forced himself to speak the final word. The binding word. The light expanded. The hollow collapsed inward, folding in on itself like a dying star. The air compressed, then exploded outward with a thunderous crack. And then... silence. Darkness. Nothing. Cameron woke on the cold stone floor of the basement. The circle was still glowing faintly, like dying embers. Ash and salt clung to his skin. His mouth was dry, and every bone in his body ached. But there was silence. Real silence. No breathing in the walls. No whispers. No hum. The hollow was gone. He stayed still for a long time, afraid that even a whisper would bring it back. But nothing moved. Even the oppressive sense of being watched was gone. He climbed the stairs slowly, every step an effort. The hallway above looked normal again, dusty, yes, but not distorted. The door he had entered through was still open. Light from the windows spilled across the floor. The mirrors no longer rippled. His reflection stared back at him like it used to, eyes wide, exhausted, but normal. Human. Cameron walked room to room in a daze, confirming what he already knew. The house was empty. He could breathe again. He didn't stay another night. He packed what little he'd brought and left the house without looking back. As he pulled out of the gravel driveway, he saw the old oak trees stand still for once. The fog stayed behind, reluctant to let him go, curling low to the ground like a disappointed predator. But it didn't follow. It couldn't. At least, that's what he told himself. 3 weeks later. Cameron stayed in a motel 2 towns over. He didn't go back to work. Didn't answer messages from old friends. His nights were spent reading the rest of the Hollow Watchers, and the notebooks he'd taken from the attic. Trying to make sense of what had happened. What he'd done. Every ritual came with a cost. Clara hadn't mentioned what his was. He assumed the price was pain. Fear. Maybe even his memories. Some of them had begun to feel thinner, like images blurred in a photo, details missing where once there were faces. But that wasn't the cost. Not yet. The signs began subtly. He'd wake with muddy shoes and dirt under his fingernails. Sometimes, branches in his bed. Once, he found a dead crow on the windowsill, its eyes plucked out, its beak filled with red thread. He remembered what Clara had said, if it speaks your name, it owns you. The hollow had spoken his name. Had it marked him? Had it followed him after all? He returned to Clara's cabin in the woods. Or tried to. The path was gone. The trees had overgrown everything. No trail. No signs. No structure. Where her cabin should have stood, there was only a clearing with a circle of stones and a single animal skull placed on a stump. She was gone. Or maybe she'd never really been there to begin with. Back at the motel, he tried to sleep. That night, he dreamed of the house. But this time, it wasn't warped or bleeding. It was calm. Waiting. The front door was open. The windows dark. The trees leaned inward like an audience. Something inside called to him, not with his name, but with a feeling. Come home. He jolted awake. The mirror across from his bed was fogged. But the room was cold. He hadn't showered. He stood, walked toward it, and paused. There was a handprint on the glass. From the other side. He stared into the mirror. His reflection stared back. Then smiled. He didn't. The next morning, he checked out. As he loaded his car, he noticed something strange. In the back seat sat a journal. Not his. It was bound in leather, stitched with twine, no title. Inside were pages written in handwriting he didn't recognize. But the entries were all about him. August 13th. He ran from the house again. He thinks the ritual worked. He thinks he's free. He is not. He never was. August 20th. He dreams now more often. That's how it begins. He will return. They always return. August 28th. He's begun to forget the name. The hollow doesn't like that. It feeds on memory, but it hates being forgotten. The final entry was dated tomorrow. September 3rd. He comes back today. The house is hungry. The door is open. He dropped the journal like it had burned him. It landed open on the asphalt. The final page bled red. Not ink. Blood. 1 week later. The locals said they saw him. Parked outside the house. Just sitting there for hours. Then, one night, the lights in the house turned on. All of them. Every room, blazing yellow. The fog returned. And Cameron Price was never seen again. 1 month later. A new, for sale, sign went up in front of the house. The real estate listing said. Historic property with potential. Quiet. Secluded. Family estate. Light renovations needed. They didn't mention the altar in the basement. Or the faces in the mirror. Or the fact that, sometimes, at night, the house breathes. The end. Or maybe not. Because houses like that? They don't end. They wait. And they remember your name.